Hey, I'm Yuri. So this is a video for beginners. It's the question I see most asked in like Discord chats and like Reddit questions and just Facebook groups. Anywhere you can ask questions in like a film composition sort of manner. This is the one that I see most, and it's how do I write parts for strings? So this is going to be a video for beginners. If you're advanced or even just like sort of know what you're doing, this probably won't help you, but you can watch if you like it. You're not the target. So this is really just for people who have no idea what they're doing and sort of want to learn some tricks. So, okay. So I started by just when I was started, I'd go in a minor key, and I chose A minor because it's the easiest one for people who don't know what they're doing to understand, because there's no sharps or flats. I went into a random number generator, and this is what came out of it. So I actually got quite lucky, I think. You can see here that it actually went back to the tonic after 4 bars, and you can see here that it actually went to the 5th on the last one, which is great because 5 leads into 1 really well. So if I was to loop this, it'd sound nice. So I've just done what I think is probably what you will do first, which is I've got all the chords laid out in front of me like this, which sounds like this. All the chords are in root position, nothing's been done to them, there's just the triads there, there's not even a bass note or anything, it's just how it is. The next thing to do is, I'm just going to copy this just so we can see what we've done and what we will end up with. The first thing is called voice leading, and voice leading basically means you want the least movement between notes as possible. So all we're going to do is try and bring these up into the same octave. So just going to move those up an octave, and you can see that those aren't moving at all, and this one's only moving by 1 tone or 2 semitones. Just going to keep doing that. Oop. And that's pretty good. So that's as close as we can get. So you can see that they're hardly moving at all. The biggest movement is by a tone, and that's all. So now this is what that sounds like. Okay, I don't have to play it all. You can hear that it's already sounding less, something like this. How it sounds very disconnected. Here it sounds really attached. So after that, as you should know, there's 5 different parts and strings. You've got 2 violins, doing violin 1 and 2, the viola, cello, and then bass. So the cello and the double bass, for the most part, and for now, we're going to make them play the exact same thing, which is just going to be the root note. So you can see here, I've actually written up there what the notes are. Alright, cool. So your next step after we've done the voice leading is to create interest. So there are a few ways that you can create interest. So the first way to create interest is stop making everything so static rhythmically. So if we look here, they're all... sorry, I'll just make the double bass too. Which a double bass just sits an octave below. But we're going to bring this down 2 octaves because C0 is the lowest note that you can play on a bass, assuming it's 5 strings, which it probably is. So at the moment, you can see they're all 1 bar. So of course this depends on if you're scoring to a film, it depends on the cut. If there's other instruments in the mix, which there probably are, it depends on them. If the percussion is very clearly doing a 4/4 pattern, if you move these things out, it might sound weird. But for the sake of showing you how this works and how it's done, we're just going to pretend that this is going to work with whatever the solo instrument is or everything else that's going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is just shorten this one. And this isn't a formula or anything. This is just me looking at it and just sort of having a... So... I'm going to move this base across too. You can hear how it's sort of a bit more interesting. It's not amazing, but and I think with these ones, it's probably best to keep them how they are. Yep, so that's creating a bit more interest. Some other things that you can do, and obviously you're going to have more than 8 bars, and you're going to have more time to do stuff. If I do everything over this whole thing, it's going to make it look really messy, which is why I'm trying to space it out by only doing a bit here. Next way that's doing something cool is sort of dropping in and out of layers. So what I'm going to do is here, where we repeat and go back to the root, I'm just going to shorten it so there's no bass. That's going to come in halfway through. And then we're just going to do the reverse, 2 bars later. So this will now sound like this. Again, nothing spectacular, just sort of creating a bit more interest. This isn't changing anything to the tone, to the chords or anything. This is solely just looking at it and trying to make a few changes visually, I guess you could say. But it's really just stopping everything from being so predictable. The next thing is you will need some theory. So if you don't need theory, you can leave this step out, or you can just look up a couple easy steps and do those things. I'm going to do a couple things which I'll explain as I'm going, but you don't have to know them. I'm just going to add in a couple secondary dominants, which basically means we're going to go to the 5th of a chord before the target chord. So as you heard here, this is the 5th of A that we're currently in. You can hear how those two resolve and sound nicely together, how that one has tension to move to resolve to this. So we're going to do the same here, and we're going to get the 5th of whatever this chord is. So that chord is an E, which means that we want to make a B chord. So we're just going to do that really quickly up here. You can of course do it down here, but just to take you through the steps. So, and move that down. Let's see. That sounds good. So there are 4 notes here, which is actually fine because that note there, that A, is an open string of the violin. So either they could be playing this note and this note really easily, or this note and this note, or even this note and this note. They'd have to have 2 fingers down to do this. But it is possible. Other ways of doing it is by writing divisi on the score, so having half of the players play this note, the other half playing that one, or now that we're on a patch, we can actually play a million notes at a time, and this is never going to get played by a real orchestra, so that doesn't matter. You could even just do an overdub sort of thing. But for the sake of making this only 5 parts, what I'm going to do is just shorten that one, so that this one's going to step down. So it sounds more like this now. Great. We're going to add in, look around for another spot, which would be good to add that secondary dominant. So again, that's going to be a B7. So now that is doing the 7th. Maybe I do want that. Yeah, so here you can hear that that sounds good. Again, this is the same open A string that they can use, so it's not going to be a conflict of playing. Alright, so the next thing is making these parts actual parts. So I'm going to just take this down an octave because I think it's going to sound stronger. A bit more dimension between the 2 parts. So there is another step, and that's stopping these from being so perfectly voice-led. So I'll show you why we need to do that. Okay, so we're just going to look at this line here, which is the middle voice. So first I'm going to show you with this bass voice what this sort of making it have parts actually means. I'm just going to move this onto another screen so I can see it, and I will play in the cello part here. Okay, so I've just shown you the part. You can see where the walking's happening, and it's just a bit more interesting than just doing these just simple, you know, steps. And now I'm going to show you why we need to actually add stuff. This is jumpy, this isn't. So if I play this part in now, you'll see how boring this sounds, even with all the movement that I can add in, some of these sort of things. You know, if there's only one note that I have to play, it's not going to be very interesting. So, just as an example, you can see here, it's really boring. I couldn't do any walking because it's already perfect. So, what I'm going to do instead is change up these chords a little bit so they're not so perfect. Now, I always do this. So I always individually write them out as different parts instead of being in that patch sample as individual samples here, because I think it sounds better, it sounds more realistic, and you can actually give character to each of the lines. But we're not even going to talk about dynamics in this video because there's not really a point, because it's pretty much just intuition. So now we're going to change up some things. Alright, so here it's a bit bigger of a stroke. You can see how the sound is wider and thicker. Alright, so I've just done all of them, all the steps in between them. I've left the bass because bass doesn't pronounce as well, and you kind of need something to hold everything in place. But I'll show you what it sounds like now. Great. So now it comes to the bass. So the thing about bass is the cellos and double bass are both bass instruments. For the most part, that they both do the exact same thing, either in unison or an octave apart. But occasionally the cello can go off and do its own thing. Because it's still a bass instrument, it's still low, but it's not so low, it can get away with doing things like the third or the fifth or the seventh, or even just any other random note, but normally ones that are in the chord work best. So I'm just going to do that here. I'm going to find some spots where it might work nicely. So I'm just going to show you now what it sounded like originally. Not very interesting versus now what it sounds like currently. You know, So anyway, that was the video. You don't have to use all these steps. You can use one or a few of them. In the order that I use them is probably the best way to do it. But again, you don't have to use all of them, and do it however you like. The main rule is go by what sounds good. Yeah, so hope that helps you. Yeah, leaders.